Hello, my name is Ariel, like the mermaid. One of the hardships that a lot of trans people face is a lot of times it's easy to constantly feel the need to prove that you are the gender you identify as. And a lot of times this is because a lot of times people will blatantly disrespect your gender identity, and people will ask you questions and say certain things that make you feel the need to prove that you are the gender that you identify with. So first off, to those people, don't do that. Don't make people have to don't put people in a position where they have to justify that they are the gender they identify as. So first off, just don't do that. Second off, for trans people, you don't have to prove, you don't have any obligation to prove that you are the gender you identify as. You don't have to start giving evidence, because a lot of times when you are put in that position, you can't start justifying your gender identity without resorting to stereotypes. Then you end up saying things like, oh, I'm a girl because I like to wear dresses and I like to put on makeup, which is not really, that doesn't make you your gender. Or, I'm a boy because I like to play soccer and I like to do this. Things like that don't define your gender. So that's like one of the big problems. And so it's tough when you are put in, and I understand it's really tough when you're put in that spot, but always remember when you are being put in that spot, and when, even if people aren't blatantly questioning your gender identity, but they have a certain attitude that makes you feel insecure about your gender, just remember, you don't have to prove to anyone that you are the gender you identify as. One thing that a lot of times is talked about in the transgender community is the idea of passing, and about the idea of going stealth. Basically the idea of passing is, passing is like the idea that you pass as the gender you identify as in that, basically that you, that people will, that people who have a very limited cis-sexist view of the world will see you and accept you as the gender that you identify as. Now, I'm a person who doesn't really put that much value on myself passing, because I just can't really pass in a way that makes me feel comfortable within a cis-normative culture, because I just don't really fit in with that, because I don't identify with one of the binary genders, and that's kind of critical to passing in this kind of cis-normative culture we live in. But I don't think less of anyone who does put value on passing for themselves. I think that it's understandable that someone feels the need to be seen as the gender they identify with. But something that I would, warn a lot of trans people is to be careful, to make sure that you don't let your gender identity limit how you express yourself. Just because you are a trans man doesn't mean that you can't be sensitive and that you can't talk about emotions, and you can't, you can even, you can be a trans man and you can wear makeup still. You can, wear a dress. I knew someone who identified as a trans male for a while, and, they still wore, dresses and makeup every now and then. Now they identify as non-binary, but still it didn't, you should be able to, you should be able to identify as male, and still be fabulous and wear a dress and wear some makeup if you want to. You know, you shouldn't let that limit you if that's what you want to do, but you still can identify a certain way. And similarly, as a trans woman, I think a lot of times you'll suddenly discover like the beauty standard that is placed on a lot of women, and just a lot of other things that limit women and limit how women can express themselves in our culture. And you don't have to identify as a woman. That doesn't mean you have to accept the oppression that women face. That means that you should, you can fight that oppression. You don't have to shave your legs. You don't have to, you don't have to do anything that you don't feel comfortable doing, because no woman should have to, you shouldn't have to shave your armpits or shave your legs or do whatever. You don't have to conform to what the sexist standards are in our culture, because that's just continuing to enable them. So yeah, basically, I think it's understandable if you feel the need to pass and you feel the need to be able to be seen a certain way, but make sure that you weigh the costs, like how much is it worth passing, because you shouldn't have to sacrifice who you are and what you're comfortable with and what makes you you. You shouldn't have to sacrifice those things, and you shouldn't have to sacrifice anything that you enjoyed about being seen as the gender that you were assigned. And because like sometimes, I think a lot of times trans people will suddenly, when they start presenting themselves a certain way, they suddenly realize like certain standards that do suck about being identifying as the other gender. Like, because particularly there's a lot of a lot of certain like standards that are put on men, that you can't be like open about your emotions. You can't it's all bullshit. So don't let your don't let like society standards and what society says about gender like limit you, basically, because it's particularly, I think sometimes it's particularly hard as a trans person, and wanting to be accepted for who you are. But also to cisgender people, like also, this still applies to you. Don't, just because you identify as the gender you were assigned doesn't mean that you can't, just, fight the stupid gender norms that we have in our culture, because they're limiting, and I think that people are starting to realize that it's all bullshit. And, so fuck the patriarchy. Yeah.